Gnome blessings, my fellow Gnomians. Today we line our gnome hats with tinfoil because we're looking up. All October long, we've been walking through the darker corners of the human experience. The hidden folk in the hedges, the demons from old texts, the ghosts that walk between walls. But this time, our gaze leaves Earth entirely. This episode is about the stories that rise into the sky and come back changed. It's about alien abduction. The missing hours, the lights past the trees, the strange markings, the memories that unfold only years later. We'll look at how the modern mythology of abduction began, from the Betty and Barney Hill story to the cases explored in the documentary Extraordinary, The Seeding, where people describe encounters that, in a way, seem half scientific, half spiritual. We'll talk about the psychology that explains some of these stories and the evidence that keeps them from being dismissed completely. We'll explore what people say happened to them: paralysis, the bright lights, communication without words, and sometimes even the belief that something was taken from them: genetic material, time, normalcy, and something new was left behind. We'll also look at what those experiences mean: the terror, the transcendence, the possibility that contact, whatever form it takes, is one of humanity's oldest obsessions. Those of you who have followed my other channels over the last 10 years or so know that talking about aliens and UFOs, it's one of my favorite subjects, and I found an excuse to bring it back to Gnome Talk again. But before we take off, I want to pause and share some of the Church of Gnome updates because things have been taken off faster than a UFO. The response to the the Gnomian Book of Proverbs. The pre-order has been, oh geez, knocking shit over. It's been wild. I did not expect it to be taking off so much. So I have found myself every couple days needing to put in another order to get batches of the book printed, to get sent to me, because I mean it is about a few week turnover between when I put in an order for a batch of books and then it gets to me. So trying to keep up with the timing of not over ordering but not under ordering, but having it so stuff shows up in time to ship. This has been crazy, but thank you. I totally appreciate all this, and I'm excited for you all to get your hands on the book. And I do have some good news for those of you who were amongst the first 150 people to get the pre-order. I am getting a batch of books earlier than I thought. I was thinking of the earliest was going to be between like November 7th and 10th, but it's looking like some of those are going to start showing up next Tuesday and Wednesday. And so enough to fulfill those first 150 pre-orders. I will be getting those out as quick as I can as soon as they get here. And I have gotten a lot of messages and requests from people, like if I'll, sign theirs before I send it out. So I figure, what, for everyone who has already pre-ordered and everyone who does get a pre-order in before like November 1st, I'll sign away on it. So that's what's happening. Oh, and then also talking about things leaving the door. I think I might have mentioned in the last episode, but I have finally got international shipping set up for the Church of Gnome. So we're global now, and already in this last few days, we've sent out the very first ordainment packages all across the UK, Denmark, Australia, Latvia, Germany, Sweden, Hungary, Ireland, tons of places. So I'm excited that our sacred gnome hat is going to be on the heads of people around the world. So that's what's happening, everyone. So I thank you. I thank you all. So let's get back to the sky because tonight or today, whenever you're listening to this, we're not just asking if we're alone, we're asking what happens when the questions start asking back. When the light outside the window knows your name. When the story you've heard your whole life about the stars suddenly turns into an experience you can't explain away. Is it a dream, trauma, pattern, or something vast and ancient trying to start a conversation? Whatever the truth is, we'll approach it in the Gnomian way. With reverence without gullibility, curiosity without contempt, and the lantern, hey, bright enough to see where the mystery begins and where it begins to look back at us. So, gnome blessings, my friends. Let's get into it. Let's start with a picture. A couple drives home through the mountains at night. The road winds, radio hums, and the stars are hanging low and heavy, so close that they almost feel like snowflakes. Then the light comes, and it doesn't move like headlights or a plane. It hums, it hangs, the air thickens. When Betty and Barney Hill saw that light in 1961, they didn't know that they were about to start what really has become the modern story of alien abduction. They were, an ordinary couple, Barney a postal worker, Betty a social worker, coming home from a vacation in Canada. Hours later, they found themselves miles down the road, their watches stopped and their memories wiped clean in half. Days later, under hypnosis, they began to remember the lights, the figures, the table, the missing time. Skeptics have had a field day with the Hill case for decades, but even the most skeptical historians admit something. The story, it almost became a template. In the years that followed, hundreds, if not thousands, of people began to describe the same strange sequence of events: bright lights, the feeling of paralysis or examination, loss of time, a return, a pattern. It was forming, and it didn't care about geography or culture. The idea that the others could take you, physically take you, burst into our collective imagination. It was no longer about seeing a bright light shooting across the sky. It was about being chosen, maybe even being altered. And by the mid 1970s, abduction was everywhere. Travis Walton's story, Fire in the Sky, turned into a bestseller and a film. Willie Strieber's Communion put the now iconic gray alien face on bookstore shelves and nightmares alike. These weren't fringe figures scribbling in UFO newsletters. They were articulate, frightened, strangely consistent. Their descriptions matched like a chorus: the light, the paralysis, the table, the beings with eyes too big to ignore. And here's where it can get stranger. While those stories were spreading, researchers started noticing patterns that didn't fit into easy explanations. People from different countries who had never read the same books, never watched the same shows, were describing almost identical experiences. Not only the what, but the feel, telepathic voices, sudden calm in the middle of terror, the overwhelming sense that the experience wasn't random. Over time, many of the stories deepened from fear to purpose. And that's where documentaries like Extraordinary The Seeding enter the conversation. They explore claims that the abductions weren't just experiments or encounters, but part of hybridization projects, the blending of human and non human DNA. Women reported being shown children who looked almost human, but not quite. Children they somehow knew were theirs. Men described procedures that felt clinical yet intimate, as if they were pieces in some sort of unseen blueprint. Whether you believe that or not, it's worth sitting with what that says about us as a species. Every culture has a version of this same myth. Beings who come from the heavens to mix with humans, to guide or manipulate, to teach or test. The Greeks had gods who came down in storms. The Sumerians had the Anunnaki. And then medieval Europe had their own strange stuff, the incubi, the succubi who visited at night. The shape changes with the century, but the story stays, something from above crosses the line into our world, and then we're never the same again. And maybe that's the point. When we talk about alien abduction, we're not just talking about the paranormal, we're talking about modern myth making, about how humans in the age of satellites and smartphones still turn mystery into story. Because whatever these lights and experiences are, psychological, spiritual, extraterrestrial, they are forcing us to confront something both cosmic and personal that we might not be fully in charge of the narrative. Every generation needs its version of the gods who come down. And I guess for our generation, it's they wear silver and light instead of wings and thunder. And when millions of people say, I've seen something, and when surveys show that about half of all Americans at least believe in intelligent life beyond Earth, and some studies and surveys have shown that, maybe 3 to 5% of people claim that they've had their own direct contact and experience. Maybe that's not delusion. Maybe it's a new mythology forming in real time, trying to make sense of how vast the sky has become. Because for all of our technology, the truth is, we're still children staring up at the dark, waiting for someone or something to blink back at us. So next, we're going to step into the light. Don't go towards the light. You're lying in bed. The house is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Then something changes. The silence doesn't deepen, it tightens. You feel a vibration, low, soft, crawling under your ribs like the static before a storm. You open your eyes, but the room isn't dark anymore. There's a light, thin, surgical, and nowhere that it should be. And then you can't move. Many abductees describe that same sort of paralysis. You try to shout, but your voice stays trapped somewhere in your throat. You can see, you can think, you can feel, but your body has gone on strike against you. Some say the light grows until the walls dissolve. Others say they float upward, weightless, but aware of hands that aren't quite hands, guiding them through ceilings, through the air, into something vast. Sounds like a nightmare, but people who have lived it swear it was more vivid than dreaming, too consistent, too structured, too real. Those who remember what happens next describe rooms that feel alive, not metal, not wood, smooth surfaces that curve like they were almost grown instead of built. The air is sterile, electric. The figures who stand over them are often silent. Their faces, if faces is even the right word, are unreadable. Mostly, the classic grays, large heads, skin kind of like pearl, eyes that take up half their face and seem to not look at you but through you. Others describe tall, luminous beings or shapes like mantises, elegant and calm. And through it all, one detail repeats: communication without sound, a voice in the mind, not through the ear, thoughts that don't feel like yours but arrive fully formed. Some hear reassurance, you'll be fine. Others hear instruction or nothing at all. Many abductees recall medical procedures, needles, instruments, pressure at the temples or stomach. The imagery can sound clinical, but the emotions behind it are anything but. Some speak of terror, others of numb detachment, and a few describe something else entirely, a sense of purpose that they can't explain. And once again, this is where that same documentary, Extraordinary the Seeding, dives deep. Follows people who claim the encounters weren't random experiments, but part of a long, deliberate program. Women describe being told they were part of a hybridization effort, creating life that bridges human and extraterrestrial DNA. They remember being shown children who looked nearly human with eyes too large or skin faintly luminous and feeling an overwhelming maternal bond to them. Men report similar experiences, sperm extraction, telepathic communication, and later dreams or flashbacks of meeting hybrid offspring. To outsiders, these stories sound completely absurd and unbelievable. But to those who tell them, they are trauma and revelation all at once. Many speak of sleepless nights, anxiety, or strange marks appearing on their skin, yet just as many say that over time that fear gave way to understanding, that something profound happened even if it didn't make sense. And this is where it all gets complicated. Abduction experiences are often transformative. Afterward, people describe psychic sensitivity, sudden artistic or technological inspiration, even a compulsion to care more for the planet. It's as if the encounter, whatever it was, flipped a switch. Some experiencers become environmental advocates, others develop new spiritual frameworks. The visitors, they say, didn't come to conquer, but to warn, to remind us that Earth is fragile and we are reckless tenants. And still, there is the darker side, the sleeplessness, the feeling of being watched, the fear of being taken again. Psychologists who study abductees note that the symptoms can mirror post traumatic stress disorder, but then there's kind of a paradox. Trauma survivors often show disorganized memories, but abduction accounts tend to be structured and strangely consistent even across cultures. When Whitley Strieber wrote Communion, he described his own abduction not as horror, but as communion in the literal sense, contact that broke him open. He called his visitors both terrifying and holy. And that phrase seems to really sum up the whole phenomenon, an event that feels half violation, but also half invitation. So, what's really happening here? Psychologists, they'll point to sleep paralysis, disassociation, or repressed trauma resurfacing through the imagery of our time, where once we saw demons, now we see aliens. Neurologists point to the temporal lobe, where stimulation can trigger visions of light, presence, even floating sensations. Cultural theorists say that we're replaying an ancient script, abduction by gods, fairies, angels. It's all rebranded to the space age. But then there are the ones that just don't fit the model. The couples who remember together, the children who describe details they shouldn't know, the radar logs that line up with the stories. Every time we think we've pinned it down, something escapes the net. Many abductions, or maybe the abduction stories, are, at its core a mirror. When we stare into it, it reflects both our progress and our fear, the awe of a species that has learned to leave its planet, and the terror that something smarter is already watching. It's our modern myth, one that says that we're no longer alone, but also not necessarily in charge. And whether you see these stories as dreams, archetypes, or encounters with the unknown, they all circle the same question: what does contact really mean? So, next, we're going to go through the tightrope between science and the unexplainable. What can be measured, what can't, and what happens when that data starts looking back at us. So, whenever stories of abduction reach the public, Science steps in with a flashlight, and it should. That's how we separate what's truly strange from what's just us being human in the dark. Let's start with the part that makes the most sense. Many of the symptoms abductees describe, paralysis, pressure, the feeling of a presence, fit cleanly within known neurological events, such as sleep paralysis, which I know we talked about in the last episode, but that does or can account for a lot of it. It's the moment when your mind wakes before your body does. You're conscious, you can see, but you can't move. The ancient world might have called this the old hag or a demon sitting on your chest. We now call it REM atonia, and the feeling of being suffocated or being watched is just your brain misfiring in half wakefulness. Add a streak of light from a car outside your window or a ceiling fan's reflection, and suddenly you've got the very beginning of the modern abduction story. Then there's the temporal lobe, the region of the brain responsible for processing emotion and memory. When stimulated by whether it be epilepsy, by lack of oxygen, by stress, it can create a vivid sense of presence, soundless voices, even out of body sensations. The neuroscientist Michael Persinger tried this in the 1990s with what was called the God helmet, using magnetic fields to reproduce mystical and alien encounters in volunteers. Many of those volunteers walked out dazed, insisting someone or something had been in the room with them. And then we have hypnosis and memory regression, which is often used to recover abduction details. You can add another twist to that. When a hypnotist gently guides someone through those memories, the mind becomes highly receptive. It wants to cooperate. If the hypnotist isn't careful with their wording or questions, they can unintentionally plant images or suggestions that feel completely authentic. The brain obliges, filling gaps and turning fragments of sensation or emotion into a coherent story. You can emerge from that trance absolutely certain of a memory that never actually happened. And that it's not necessarily intentional deception, it's just the way how memory works. And that's why, at least from what I've seen with a lot of the hypnotists that work with people who believe that they've been abducted, they will film their session with the abductee so that way it can be rewatched afterwards and the person can be confident that they weren't led with suggestion or imagery. They can go back through themselves to analyze how were the questions asked. So, anyways, take Betty and Barney Hill. Their star map, drawn from Betty's hypnotic recall, matched a pattern later identified by astronomers as the Zeta Reticuli system, a detail that she couldn't have known from public sources. Or Travis Walton, whose coworkers passed polygraphs and whose disappearance was logged by police before his reappearance 5 days later. There are cases with radar confirmations, multiple witnesses, even physical anomalies, soil compression where craft supposedly landed, burns, radiation spikes. None of this necessarily proves abduction, but it complicates the dismissal. Then there's the psychological aftermath, post traumatic stress, light sensitivity, and phobias that appear in some of the experiencers. It's not just fear. Many develop what researchers call transformative after effects. They report new artistic talents, intuitive insights, environmental consciousness, a sense of being called to something larger. It's as if the experience, whether it was real or constructed, it reprogrammed them. Psychiatrists see trauma, theologians see intuition. Even the US government has edged into the conversation. The Pentagon's 2021 UAP report admitted that some of the unidentified area phenomena appear to defy known physics. NASA recently announced its own team up to investigate UAP data. They're not necessarily saying aliens, but it does mean that the mystery has stepped out of my beloved tinfoil hat territory into official letterhead. So, what do we do with this uneasy mix? Scientific explanations that solve a lot of the cases, but not all. Witnesses who can't all be lying, and experiences that reshape people's lives. We could take the easy way out, pick a side. We could say it's all neurological or it's all extraterrestrial, but the truth seems to live in that gray space between, well, gray faces and gray matter, where psychology and cosmology blur. Maybe abduction stories are what happen when our inner universe and outer universe collide, when the mind's own machinery projects its longing and its fears onto the sky. Or maybe, just maybe, the reason the stories repeat across time and culture is because something has indeed been with us all along, studying, nudging, teaching, or warning, wearing whatever mask our age will recognize. Science explains a lot. It explains the hum, the paralysis, the lights that flicker in ordinary houses. But science also reminds us that a lot of explanations are temporary. The history of discovery is a graveyard of certainties. Once lightning was impossible fire, then it was Zeus, then it was electricity. Now it's both weapon and wonder. What if abduction sits at the same frontier? Part folklore, part physics, waiting for the vocabulary that we don't maybe have yet. And so, in this next part, we're going to talk about that frontier, not as data, but as meaning, because the real question isn't whether visitors come from the stars, it's what these stories, fearful, luminous, absurd, are trying to teach us about being human under a sky that still refuses to be empty. So, when you strip away the bright beams and the buzzing craft, what are alien abduction stories really saying? What makes them echo so persistent from the cold deserts of Nevada to the crowded apartments of New York? At the simplest level, they are stories of intrusion and awe. To be taken is to lose control. To be returned is to live with new perspective. Abduction testimonies move between those poles, terror and transcendence. The feeling that something vast noticed you and you'll never again fit neatly back into your old life. Look across decades and a pattern starts to show. The lights aren't just coming from the sky, they're coming from within us. These encounters mirror the fears and fascinations of the age that tells them. In the Cold War, people dreamed of dissection and surveillance. In the environmental era, they dreamed of hybrid children and planetary warnings. The abduction story adapts, wearing whatever mask our collective anxiety will recognize. But that doesn't mean it's empty. Myths survive because they carry truth wrapped in metaphor. Every generation invents a new shape for contact. Angels, demons, fair folk, spirits, now visitors from the stars. Each version wrestles with the same questions. Are we alone? Are we safe? Are we special? The abductee's tale might be our own modern version of the shaman's journey, a passage into the unknown that dismantles identity and brings back strange wisdom. Many experiencers describe it that way. The first stage is fear, the second is surrender, and the last is revelation. A conviction that the world is larger, more populated, and more interconnected than they ever imagined. If you believe every encounter is psychological, that's still profound because abduction stories speak to our relationship with mystery. They remind us that for all our progress, we are still animals who look up at the night sky and feel both curiosity and unease. They remind us that science and spirituality share the same root impulse to name what moves above us. And then there's the other possibility, the one that we whisper about because it rearranges everything. What if some of it actually is literal? What if, in the long history of myth, what if our ancestors called gods or angels or watchers were visitors from somewhere real? The idea isn't new. It appears in Sumerian carvings, in Vedic hymns, in the Book of Enoch. Perhaps we've always been telling the same story with different vocabulary. Perhaps the sky has been holding a conversation with Earth since before we knew how to listen. That's the strange gift of the abduction myth. It refuses to let the world shrink. It forces us to admit that not knowing might be the point. So, whether the visitors are projections of our collective subconscious or travelers crossing an impossible distance, the emotional truth is the same. We are not finished learning how to meet the unknown. The real test isn't whether they exist, it's how they behave or how we behave if they do. Will we respond with fear or curiosity, with control or humility, with conquest or conversation? Maybe that's what this has all been about. Not them studying us, but life itself testing our readiness to see beyond our own reflection. So here we are, Nomians, our October lanterns flickering against the dark, looking not just into force and folklore, but now upward into the deep and glittering unknown. Whether you think abduction stories are psychological, spiritual, something truly frickin' cosmic, man, they all point toward the same human impulse. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves. We want the universe to notice that we are here, and maybe it has. Because if even a fraction of these encounters are what they seem, then consciousness may not be confined to one planet, one species, or one body. It might be a thread that ties every living thing in the cosmos together. The awareness that looks out through a million eyes and still recognizes itself. And if none of them are literal, if the lights are dreams or trauma or myth doing its quiet work, then the meaning doesn't disappear. It just changes form. These stories still show us how the human mind reaches for contact when it feels small, how it turns fear into narrative, how it invents language for awe. In a way, they reveal that the drive to connect, to be seen, to be understood is our most alien and our most familiar quality all at once. The science will keep investigating, the skeptics will keep asking questions, the believers will keep watching the sky, and that's how it should be. The truth needs all three of those: the question, the discipline, and the wonder. So, tonight, after this episode, look up once before you go to bed. Maybe you'll see nothing but clouds and satellites. Maybe you'll see a plane. Maybe you'll see a star that pulses a little too slowly to be either. Whatever you see, let it remind you that the story of contact isn't only about visitors from beyond, it's about us. Our readiness, our humility, our curiosity, and our courage to admit that we don't have the full map yet. Because mystery isn't proof or superstition, it's a relationship. The moment we stop looking is the moment we stop speaking back. So, my Nomians, may your night stay peaceful even when the sky hums. May your wonder never shriek under certainty. May your question stay sharp and your courage soft, and may you always find yourself looking up, not in fear, but in recognition. Gnome blessings, my fellow Gnomians. Until next time.